Van 4 Papa Van Nuys ground taxi to Compass Rose. Van Nuys Grumman has a 6-6 November to taxi from the ballpark back over to the Metalworks.
And 2-2 Delta, we're going to taxi back into Clay Lacey here for sure.
Van Nuys ground, 2 Papa Sierra by United, Delta.
Safety in U.S. air transportation is the prime concern of the Federal Aviation Administration. For this reason, anyone wishing to become eligible for air taxi operations must first meet FAA air carrier safety standards for equipment, personnel, service, and management. The goal of this presentation, then, is to provide you with an orientation to the FAA air carrier certification process. This program focuses on the process as it relates to air taxi applicants who intend to conduct operations on a limited scale. Typical limited scale operations involve operators who use only one pilot in their operation, or a charter operation consisting of a single pilot in command with a pool of no more than 3 second-in-command pilots. Or finally, a basic Part 135 operator. A basic Part 135 applicant will have more than one pilot in command on staff and may have varied aircraft, but otherwise will be limited in size and scope of operation. Air carrier certificate holders operating aircraft with no more than 30 passenger seats and no more than 7,500 pounds payload capacity are commonly called air taxi operators. All air taxi operators are certificated under the rules of Part 135 of the Federal Aviation Regulations. The certification process is accomplished by completing a series of events, which are divided into phases. An issuance of an FAA air carrier certificate is based on your successful completion of each phase of the certification process. A good way to describe the air carrier certification process is to say that it's a system through which you or your organization demonstrates that you can comply with all FAA certification and operational requirements. This certification process, which applies to both Part 121 and Part 135 operations, is divided into 5 phases: pre-application, formal application, document compliance, demonstration and inspection phases. These overlap, and I'll talk about that a bit later. And finally, the certification phase. This advisory circular is a primary source of written guidance about the certification process. If you don't already have one, be sure to ask for one at this office when the program is over. Familiarize yourself with it, because it probably contains the answers to most of your initial questions about the certification process. It also includes instructions and a sample of how to fill out a pre-application statement of intent. After the information on your pre-application statement of intent is received and processed by this office, a member of the FAA certification team will contact you to arrange a meeting where the certification process can be discussed in greater detail. In order to gain some insight into both your responsibilities and the FAA's responsibilities, we need to take a look now at each phase individually.
Our meeting was for what time? Right now. Okay.
Hello, may I help you?
Yes, we're here for our 135 pre-application meeting with Audrey Shetty.
Okay, I'll get her. Just a moment, please.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Audrey.
I'm Lad Scott.
Nice to meet you, Lad.
Hi, Audrey. Tom Mangum.
Tom.
Jim Ford.
Nice to meet you, Jim. The meeting will be in the conference room. You come with me?
The pre-application phase begins with your first pre-application meeting with the FAA certification team assigned to your project. The FAA certification team normally consists of a maintenance inspector, an avionics inspector, and an operations inspector.
We're here today for a pre-application meeting for your certificate.
During this dramatization, the operations inspector is serving as the certification project manager, or CPM. All of your correspondence, both to and from the FAA team, will be coordinated with the CPM.
What our plan of action is to fly the single engines, cargo and passengers.
The applicant's certification team normally consists of at least the same management personnel as those listed on the pre-application statement of intent, and anyone else who will be responsible for operational control.
We're going to be flying all over the Southwest.
The FAA team will then review in detail each phase of the certification process and provide a pre-application package. The pre-application package contains forms, information, and samples designed to assist you in planning target dates for completing required certification events. All pre-application packages will contain a certification job aid, which outlines the necessary requirements for each phase of certification. A schedule of events is included. This is a planning document you will submit to the certification team. It indicates your best estimate of the date each item, activity, program, facility, or aircraft will be ready for FAA inspection. Sample and blank operations specifications data worksheets are also included. When approved, the operations specifications will specify authorizations, limitations, and other provisions appropriate to your operation. If you have not already received a certification advisory circular, one will be in the pre-application package. Briefing the applicant's certification team to ensure that they have a clear understanding of their responsibilities is one of the main goals of the pre-application meeting. For example, the FAA team will ensure that the applicant understands the form and content of all documents required for the formal application.
We'll have to argue about getting that equipment later. What we need to do right now is get the approval initially. And so the answer to this section on that letter of compliance will be section N3-4, page 3.
Now is the time for the applicant to do his homework, to prepare the formal application letter and the required attachments. The type and number of attachments will vary depending on an applicant's intended scope of operation. For example, this basic Part 135 operator must submit a schedule of events, the company's general operating manual and initial training curriculums, management qualification resumes, documents of purchase, contracts for service, and an initial compliance statement. But because of a single pilot operator's limited scope of operation, that category of applicant is relieved by regulation from having to maintain required management personnel or having to submit a general operating manual or training program. Occasionally, an applicant may request a deviation from a federal aviation regulatory requirement. These requests must also be submitted as attachments to the formal application letter. The completed schedule of events sets target dates for submission or accomplishment of certification items or activities. The General Operations Manual contains information about your organization, its procedures and policies, and the duties and responsibilities of personnel. These curriculums should include at least basic indoctrination training, emergency training, and initial aircraft ground and flight training. Management resumes that are required by federal aviation regulations must also be included with your application as attachments, and the performance of your management personnel will be evaluated throughout the certification process. The number of contracts you must submit as attachments depends on the degree to which you intend to use outside services. The initial compliance statement is the document you will prepare that explains how your company intends to comply with each regulation under Part 135 applicable to your proposed operation. To summarize, the pre-application phase consists of the designation of the FAA certification team, conducting the pre-application meeting, and finally, the applicant's development of the formal application letter and necessary attachments. After the formal application letter and necessary attachments are prepared, they will be submitted to the FAA certification team, who will review the documents for completeness and then contact you to schedule a formal application meeting. The applicant's formal application letter and required attachments contain sufficient information and are acceptable to the FAA team. The purpose of the formal application meeting is to discuss with the applicant minor discrepancies, omissions, or questions about the submitted application and attachments. Once all of the parties have agreed on actions to be taken, the formal application meeting is ended. The applicant will be notified in writing of acceptance or rejection of the formal application package. The third phase of the certification process is the document compliance phase. In the document compliance phase, your submissions are evaluated and either accepted or rejected by the FAA certification team. Along with the attachments required to be included with the formal application letter, you may wish to submit some additional material, such as a minimum equipment list or a request for a deviation from a particular federal aviation regulation. Remember, during this phase, your initial compliance statement must be finalized. The fourth component of the certification process is called the demonstration and inspection phase. This phase begins while tasks of the document compliance phase are still taking place.
Good morning, Audrey.
Morning, lad. Nice to see you.
Well, I'm ready for this.
Good. We'll get started then.
The FAA will determine by on-site inspection whether your facilities, equipment, and personnel comply with Part 135 of the Federal Aviation Regulations.
May I see your current list of aircraft?
All right.
Here we see an inspector evaluating a proposed record-keeping system at the applicant's principal business office. Airworthiness inspectors will evaluate your aircraft maintenance facility and inspect your aircraft for Part 135 airworthiness requirements. And an operations inspector will evaluate pilot competency by giving proficiency flight checks appropriate to the type of operation. You know, applicants often ask, how long does it take to get a certificate? Well, that's a difficult question to answer. It's a little like asking how long it will take to get a commercial pilot certificate, or an instrument rating, and so forth. To a large extent, the answer depends upon an applicant's motivation and quality of effort. But after a long and admittedly demanding process, you will have satisfied all regulatory requirements.
Boy, Audrey, we really appreciate you giving us all the assistance and your expertise in this project.
Both teams have worked together towards a common goal, issuance of an air carrier certificate. The final responsibility of the CPM during the certification phase is to award the certificate and operation specifications.
Let's go flying.
Well, this completes our basic orientation to the 5 phases of the certification process. If you have any questions, inspectors from this office will be happy to assist you. As a final thought, it's because of this certification process that the high level of safety built into our United States air transportation system is unparalleled anywhere in the world.